A snow-covered mountain, bright blue sky, and white, wispy clouds. Snow and tall evergreen trees in front of rugged mountains. Text: protecting and preserving high-elevation forests by the National Park Service Sierra Nevada Network Inventory and Monitoring Program. Rocky mountainside with pine trees. Tree density diminishes at higher elevation.
High elevation forests are those areas right at the edge of where trees can exist.
Text: Jonathan Nesmith, ecologist, Sierra Nevada Inventory and Monitoring Program.
These areas we call subalpine forests, and that's really what we're talking about, are these places right up to the edge of where trees are able to grow. Here in the southern Sierra Nevada parks, Yosemite, Sequoia, Kings Canyon, we have 5 different species of white pine. The species that we are paying special attention to are some of the high elevation white pines, foxtail and whitebark pine in particular. Our job as scientists is to monitor these areas and make sure that we understand how they're doing and how they're changing through time.
A forested mountain. Text: Sylvia Holton, Program Manager, Sierra Nevada Inventory and Monitoring Program.
We identified high elevation forests as a place that was likely to change in the future. So we chose these species as indicators. They're right at the limit of their climate tolerance.
Measuring and flagging rocky terrain. Text: Christy Brigham, Chief of Resource Management, Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks.
So inventory and monitoring can be kind of technical terms. What does that even mean in a natural landscape? But they're hugely important to us as the people responsible for taking care of this place. So the first, inventory, is just that question of what's even here? And that seems simple, but when you have over 800,000 acres to look at, and a lot of those places are very difficult to get to, take days if not weeks of hiking with heavy packs to reach, that's a great question, and one that we hadn't really dealt with before the inventory program came along. What plants are here? What animals? How many? Where? How has that changed over time? And that change over time gets us into monitoring. So we're responsible, our legislation says that we have to preserve these places unimpaired for future generations. If we don't know what's here, we can't tell you whether it's in as good of a condition as it was when we got it.
Snow-covered pine trees. Text: Whitebark pine.
Whitebark pine is considered a keystone species, and what that means is they support a vast array of other species that wouldn't be able to exist in these areas without them. A perfect example of that is the Clark's nutcracker.
Clark's nutcracker picking at pine cones.
The whitebark pine and the Clark's nutcracker have evolved together to where they now depend on each other. The pine depends on the Clark nutcracker for seed dispersal, and in turn the whitebark pine serves as the primary food source for these birds.
Text: Yosemite National Park, whitebark pine. Garrett Dickman, botanist, Yosemite National Park.
Yosemite wouldn't be the national park it is today without the biodiversity of trees that we have here. Whitebark pine is one of the most important species at this elevation. We're about 10,000 feet right now. We're at that transition between the forest and the alpine. So from the whitebark pine's perspective, the Sierra Nevada is in better shape than many other places like the Rocky Mountains, where they've been hit really hard by blister rust and beetles.
A small whitebark pine tree covered in snow.
I'm an eternal optimist, so I have to say that the whitebark pine will persevere. And because we have a long history of inventory and monitoring them, we can immediately start to make management moves if we need to.
Snow falling on trees.
Here in the southern Sierra Nevada, it's one of the only places left in its range where we still have not seen dramatic declines in these populations.
A green mountainside with large pine trees on a sunny day. Text: Sequoia National Park, foxtail pines.
One of the really cool things about foxtail pines is they only occur in California in 2 small populations. They're rare trees, and they grow very slowly.
Tall, asymmetrical, pine trees in rocky terrain.
We're standing here in the middle of an old-growth foxtail pine forest in Sequoia National Park. These trees can grow to be thousands of years old.
Foxtail pine forest.
They're some of the longest-lived pine trees in the world, and they just are a symbol of endurance and toughness.
Measuring between trees. Text: High elevation forests, monitoring foxtail pine.
Forest monitoring crews that are sampling these areas where the trees grow. They're recording growth and which trees have died and which have survived.
2 women measuring around the trunk of a tree many yards across.
This is a snag, so it's a dead tree.
Text, Tressa Gibbard, field biologist, Sierra Nevada Inventory and Monitoring Program.
We want to try and determine the cause of death or how long it has been dead. And so we might look under the bark, but here most of the bark is gone already, to see what kind of beetles may have made these marks.
Looking through range scope to measure tree top.
The remarkable part about our monitoring is that we will return to these places in 3 years, and again in 6 years, and again in 21 years. And eventually these records will become a long-term legacy of tracking changes through time in these forests.
Placing orange flag in the ground.
Our role as inventory and monitoring scientists is to provide information about how these landscapes are changing to the superintendents, to the park managers of not only today, but of the future.
Hammering marker tag into tree.
I think about how the stories that we're capturing and we're able to tell with the studies that we're doing in these sites. To me, that's going to be informing decisions that are made for years to come. And I care so deeply about these places that being a part of that protection, to me, is just extraordinary.
Text, Woody Smeck, Superintendent, Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks.
There was a saying by an old park ranger, George Wallace. He worked in these parks in the 40s and 50s, and he compared foxtail pines to the closest living relationship we will have as humans with a sense of eternity.
Trees stretching up into the fog.
It's such an awesome mission, and I feel a heavy sense of responsibility to ensure that what we offer to the public here, what belongs to the public, is sustained in good health. And we want to invest our effort in things that are truly going to make a difference in the preservation of these great landscapes.
Bear cubs at base of a tree.
It's worth it. It's not only worth it, it's indispensable. I don't think we can be effective managers and stewards and fulfill our responsibility without that kind of data.
Rocky Ridge with snowy pine trees. National Park Service logo. Text, Sierra Nevada Network Inventory and Monitoring Program supports Yosemite National Park, Sequoia, and Kings Canyon National Parks, Devil's Post Pile National Monument. Special thanks to field biologists Sean Auclair, Tressa Gibbard, Hannah Moore, and Sam Zuckerman. For more information, go to web address go.nps.gov/SIEN.